All right. Well, thank you, Angela. Appreciate it. And welcome everybody to the second in the two-part series around ARPA-H. I will turn it over to Dr. Tara Schwetz. Thank you very much for being with us again, Tara. Hopefully we didn't scare you off the first time, apparently, so that's good. But, I'm going to level set this a little bit, and certainly Tara will give you all of the attendees an overview of ARPA-H and sort of intent, but this is intended to be an informational session for both sides of things. So Tara will certainly provide some information about where ARPA-H sits right now as an initiative and where things heading, but also the whole purpose of this is for those of you who are investors and work in the investment community broadly, one, ask questions, but two, provide feedback. Like, it would be great if ARPA-H might interact with our community in this way. Obviously, we're not informing anything, but this is intended to be a two-way street of information. So I'll stop there. I will be moderating the chat, so feel free to lob stuff in there and I'll sort of tee it up as it makes sense. But with that, Tara, take it away.
Great, thanks so much, and I appreciate the invitation to be here to discuss ARPA-H with all of you and to highlight, this what we hope will be an incredible opportunity for the country and beyond. So I just want to give like a brief kind of preview or reminder to folks about what ARPA-H is proposed to be. ARPA-H is just going back to the basics. ARPA-H stands for the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, which we hope will come to fruition soon. But just to step back and give a little bit of background on the kind of impetus of the idea and kind of where we see it going. I'm sure I don't have to remind you all that we have this incredible biomedical research ecosystem in the US. There's like sort of it's broken down kind of in two main components, right? Like the fundamental research that largely supported by NIH, National Institutes of Health. And that obviously has made some really great progress in uncovering the underlying mechanisms of health and disease. There's also the vibrant biopharmaceutical industry that has created products for patients in a multitude of different disease areas. But I think in sort of taking a perspective that the current system has some important gaps where critical things that could make a big difference for patients, but can't be done through sort of traditional public support mechanisms. And, they're for a variety of different reasons. The same is true for industry. ARPA-H is intending to fill that gap. And, when we kind of think about what ARPA-H could do, we always give a couple examples and I'm sure folks have much more ambitious and bolder ideas than these, but these are just sort of to set the stage. And it's sort of like imagining if we could make mRNA vaccines against the 50 most common mutations for cancers and teach our body how to eliminate cancer cells before they even form a tumor. What if we could develop molecular zip codes that would deliver drugs into the specific types of cells where they're needed, but avoiding side effects, essentially, the unintended consequences of effects in other cells. And these two examples that I just mentioned are again, just potential examples of capabilities that ARPA-H could develop. Now, advancing these kind of ideas is going to require a novel approach to supporting biomedical research. And it's one that has been applied in other areas of R&D. If you think about DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, this is that legendary agency that helped create the internet and GPS and a whole host of other really innovative technologies. And with ARPA-H, our goal is to create this new organization within HHS and NIH, and really build up an organization that has independence and autonomy and resources and authorities that it all needs, right? But really focus on tackling some of the biggest challenges that face human health. And it will do this by helping to support really transformative, high risk, high reward biomedical and health research aimed at driving disruptive solutions across many disease areas, working at levels that range from the molecular to the societal. So that's a wide scope, we know, but we want to make sure that we can span the spectrum. And then rapidly create new technologies, platforms, or capabilities. So things that, again, are just applicable across a range of diseases and conditions, and not necessarily targeted to one or another. And then help to overcome market failures through creative solutions, incentives, de-risking. And I think one thing to point out and mention is that part of this is going to be through developing partnerships, both across the federal government and in the private sector. And we also know that, it's not necessarily the right approach for all questions. There's the solid work that the institutes across NIH do, and we do not want to take away from that. And we think this can be complementary and synergistic. And we know that the ARPA model works, and think it's time to apply this to unlock extraordinary innovation in health. So that's my sort of brief high-level overview summary of ARPA-H, and we can get into all the nitty-gritty details and questions that you all have.
Great, thank you so much, Tara. So first of all, any questions so far on what you said? If you do have a question or want to make a comment or thought on anything that Tara said, feel free to just sort of chime in and tell us who you are, where you're from, and we can go from there. If there are no questions, it's going to be a very, very, very short session.
Well, I can mention one thing that I didn't outline before, because it's a common question that I get across the board, which is, what's the status of this? And is this going to happen this year? So just to sort of set the stage and provide background, kind of where things stand right now. Both the House and the Senate have introduced authorizing language to basically create ARPA-H. There are different versions of it that are out there right now. One is tucked into a broader Cures 2.0 bill, and the other is a standalone bill for ARPA-H. The other piece of it, because we need not just the authorities, but we need the money. So the money is tied up in the appropriations for fiscal year 22. Both the House and the Senate included ARPA-H in their FY22 budgets. And I think they allotted, it was $3 billion in the House and $2.4 billion in the Senate. Now, we don't yet have a budget, but we hope that we will have an omnibus soon, so that we can continue funding the federal government in general for fiscal year 22. But that's where ARPA-H's budget is right now tied to the FY22 appropriations.
Great, thank you, Tara. I think there's two things to tease out before we go to our first question from Rob. I know you mentioned this in the session that we did last week, but when you talk about FY22 for the benefit of the audience, I guess, does that mean that the hope is that, assuming things pass, that ARPA-H will have funding that it is able to start deploying sometime around September of this calendar year? Is that? In theory, but I mean, like, just from a, where I'm going at, like, that's when the fiscal year technically will start, around September.
Yeah, so we're in fiscal year 22 right now. So into September is fiscal year, the very end of this fiscal year. So October would be fiscal year 23. So, as we get closer and closer to September, that means less and less time to spend the resources if we get them. So the good news is that at least all the drafts that we've seen so far, and what the administration is asking for, and what the president proposed, is that ARPA-H would get multi-year funds. What that means is we could use it over multiple fiscal years. So I think it's 3-year The ask anyway is 3-year appropriations. So that's one thing. The other thing is yeah, if we actually get appropriations, let's just say, I'm going to make up a date. We'll get appropriations March 1. Yeah, the fiscal year ends September 30th. Our goal is to try to pull together something before the end of the fiscal year, and get some awards made in FY22. But again, it's all going to be dependent on timing of a lot of different things. So.
Well, and I think that was the second part of my question, and it was the multi-year thing you mentioned, meaning that, you know, that this first round, I mean, obviously it tends to be an ongoing program, but, you know, it's good to know that at least current language is saying, you know, a solid 3 years of multi-year funding to get the things ramped up. So that's great.
Yeah, we don't have to spend the $3 billion in less than 6 months.
In 6 months. That's
yeah.
We can tell stories about that separately. Anyhow, but so Rob had a question. So is the intention to run this similar with how DARPA does with program managers that run focus areas?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, what we've been trying to do, and what was been a decent amount of time, myself personally over the summer, is to sort of figure out what are the fundamental elements that make up a ARPA, you know, what makes DARPA itself successful, and try to carry those over and make that the backbone and the foundation of ARPA-H, and then put that into the environment of biomedical and health research. And, you know, one of those key elements is the program managers and how they operate and function. And so that's the idea. It's a long way to say yes to a question, but the idea is, yes, we will carry over that approach from DARPA and try to really recruit amazing program managers that you know, have great ideas and can help us take some build up some really great innovative, bold programs.
Right. I think we were on a call not too long ago talking about the program managers for DARPA, where, you know, when people would come into DARPA, their first day in, they were figuring out their day out, which was 3 or 4 years down the road, some kind of a limited rotator appointment, something like that, intending to allow the agency, or DARPA itself, to be nimble and flexible. And so it's good to see y'all emulating that model or thinking about that in some way. So
yeah, that's a key tenet of that approach, right? Is to have them be term limited. What I heard so many times repeated over and over again from all the folks who are currently at or formerly at DARPA was, you on the first day give you your badge, and on there's the date, the expiration date of the badge, and that is like, that starts basically a countdown clock for how much time you have to get, you know, everything that you want done. And of course that contributes to, you know, the culture in a way that, you know, you have this built-in sense of urgency because everyone is on that ticking clock.
Oh, good stuff. So Rob, did we answer your question fully, sir?
You did. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Outstanding. Any other questions? I know I collected some questions from the ACA Life Sciences group recently that I can sort of tee up for you, Tara, but I'm going to offer to the audience any other investor related questions, or, you know, where does, whether you're with a seed fund or an angel group or incubator, et cetera. Any questions from the audience? If not, the stone silence is scary. Well, I'll tee up one then. So Tara, I talked to some of the life science angel groups, and, you know, they talk about some recent experiences with other agencies, groups that you know, there's on one side of things the SBIR type program, which many people are familiar with, and a lot of angel groups, you know, are utilize, support, of course, and that's part of their sort of investment strategy, if you will, is having that in the mix. And then you have much, you know, for lack of a better term, later stage type activities from, whether it be from SBA type groups, or would that be from like BARDA or other agencies where they might do, it's just a different, you know, level of investment where an angel might not actually make it, that might, even somebody putting $1 million in may not make a big meaningful difference in whatever that capital deployment is. So they were wondering, if is there any thought about, for ARPA-H to have either carve outs or some level of dedicated, in different types of funds, something that incentivizes angel or earlier stage investment participation in some way.
Yeah, so, well, let me address it in a couple angles. So with ARPA-H, one of the things that we are going to build into it is a SBIR STTR program. That'll be a component of it. Now that, of course, is focused on small businesses. And so, I think that's a critical area and element that we would love to, partner with and collaborate in that space, but obviously want to work in the larger area. And so one of the things that I think will help here a little bit is that, the mechanisms for giving awards for ARPA-H are going to be through contracts and other transactions. And the reason I mentioned that is that, in particular with the other transactions, it provides a lot of flexibility to both the government as well as the people receiving the awards, to be able to not only negotiate, but sort of make decisions and set up the collaborative relationship. And I mentioned that because one of the things that I've heard, just generally speaking, is that interacting sometimes with the federal government and working with government contracts is a large endeavor sometimes and can be challenging. And the folks who are able to do so really well have a whole system in place to be able to be successful. And so the other transaction mechanism provides a little bit more flexibility for those who have that fully fleshed out model. Now, in terms of sort of the scale and scope of some of the awards too, it's a little to be determined at this point, because I think they're going to be program dependent. But the programs themselves will be sort of, I'll call them larger programs, because at NIH, a sort of typical RO1 is a few $100,000 award. And what we're talking about here with ARPA-H are much, much larger awards to be able to really, push a bunch of resources and bring together the right people to be able to tackle an issue holistically, and in a sort of hopefully embracing that urgency approach in hopefully a shorter time frame. I don't know if that fully answers all the question, but.
I mean, it was a multi-part thing, but I think that makes sense, that the fact that you will have an SBR component, that's one place that the angel community can just have on the radar as another stream. And then, I guess for some of the institutional groups looking at, but then that's almost looking at their pipeline and seeing what things might make sense for some of the larger initiatives you have that may come out in some way.
Yeah, I mean, and part of the challenge here is, and I alluded to this a little bit in the sort of intro, is that, we're not really defining exactly the space that ARPA-H is going to live in, right? Like, we're not saying we want to, focus on diseases X, Y, and Z. I think just generally, we do want to take that broader base approach, and not limit it to that area. I think that having that flexibility is going to be key, and that's what we've seen from DARPA and ARPA-E and IARPA, and I say the whole suite of ARPAs.
All the ARPAs. all
the ARPAs. And so, and of course, we're still early stage, right? We don't exist quite officially yet, and we don't have a director appointed for ARPA-H. So, we want to make sure that there's wiggle room for them to be able to apply their vision to the organization as well. So I know that makes it a little more challenging to sort of figure some of that out, because it's intentionally set up not to be kind of focused, like I would say, just to give an example, at NIH, right, we have our institutes that are, they sort of come together around key diseases or certain diseases or body types, like National Cancer Institute, National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute. And that's not how ARPA-H is going to be.
Great. Any other questions from the field, so to speak? I have another one in my back pocket, of course, but it'd be great to get somebody, one of y'all, to talk, because I'm pretty boring as it is. So any help would be appreciated. Nothing? Man.
Where will there be a home base? That's a good question. Some of that's dependent on, what, ultimately goes into the final legislation that could be dictated there. But, it's being proposed as a component of NIH currently. And so organizationally, it would kind of fit within NIH. Physically, I think that there's consensus that it should be, it should not be located on the NIH main campus in Bethesda. So where that means, exactly, I don't know. We still have to figure it out. I'd say that DARPA really has highlighted the fact that they feel like the 4-mile distance between where they are in Arlington, Virginia, and the Pentagon helps provide them a little bit of independence and autonomy that they feel they wouldn't have otherwise. So, I think, yes, that's just something that we always want to consider as we'll be thinking about this further.
Can I offer a comment as someone who's done business with DARPA?
Yes, please.
Yeah, we're in the rocket propulsion business with them. And we were able to come in with a piece of technology that let one of those time-limited guys who was in his last year find something he could be successful with, because the first 3 years had been non-productive totally. So that time limiting thing is interesting. It does provide a sense of urgency that you can take advantage of in the right circumstances. Yeah.
And that's something that we've seen over the last almost 2 years in the pandemic, right? Is that injecting that urgency out of necessity has really advanced some of the science and the innovation. Right now, we now have vaccines, we have therapeutics, we have all these diagnostics. And so I think, the idea here is to sort of carry over and continue that sense of urgency for all of the ARPA-H projects.
Well, I really look forward to the opportunity to interact with ARPA-H. I've also been working on a piece of technology that has great applicability to the healthcare field. And it's incredibly difficult to finance for many people, because the healthcare field has an awful reputation for abusing investors and being difficult to produce a result in.
Thank you, Dick. Appreciate it, sir. All right, Jen, you said you had something?
Sure. First, thank you so much for joining us again. I had the benefit of being in the session last week, and one of the things I found really fascinating was the way that you talked about how you're thinking about ARPA-H being structured differently than, say, BARDA, just being focused really on like immediate outcomes that for patient-centered use. And I was wondering, from an investor perspective, is there a way that you're thinking of trying something different or aiming towards like a different outcome, whether it's faster commercialization or kind of just thinking about that structure from an investment perspective?
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's going to, and I mentioned this previously, and last week too, right? It's where things go and where they end are going to be so program dependent, and where our starting point is with each of them. So there are going to be some things that just barely get to proof of concept, and other things that are going to be much more advanced. I think one of the key things that we're thinking about currently is how to ensure that the people that are submitting applications and ultimately the performers that we support are thinking about how this could be commercialized from the very start. And even before that, we want the program managers to think about that as they're building out the programs. Because again, as you indicated, and I'll emphasize again, a key component of this is focusing on use-driven research. So, things that patients could actually use, hopefully in the near term, and that are solving problems for them, maybe problems they didn't even know they had, but for sure some problems that they do know they have. And so we want to be thinking about that throughout the process. And we are, we're considering building out a program similar to some of the programs that DARPA and ARPA-H have. So ARPA-H has a program called Tech to Market, where basically everyone comes in and as part of their application process submits a commercialization plan. And of course, I'm simplifying this program very much. And then DARPA has a program that's the Embedded Entrepreneurs Initiative, I believe, EEI. And what they do is they kind of monitor progress of people as they move throughout the program. And those that seem to be the ones that are taking off, they kind of identify them and provide them resources from the start. And we're kind of thinking about possibly a hybrid approach. We're developing it now and trying to plan out what might work best and taking lessons learned from both of those.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other questions from the group? I'll pause for a second. I do want to make sure everybody on the group, at least for those who watch this recording, understand the flexibility of one of the things you mentioned. But first, any other questions from the group overall? All right, it's a quiet Thursday. I'm going to go ahead and do one more. We'll see.
Late in the day too.
I guess the industry guys were way more talkative than you guys were. I'm very disappointed, but it's okay. Anyhow, the one thing you mentioned when you talk about other transaction authority or OTA, that is, based on what I've seen, one of the most flexible contracting mechanisms in the federal government. Am I not mistaken in that?
Yeah, that's right. It actually, I think, I don't know the full history of it here, but what
I've used it with DoD before. And
I was gonna say, but what have been cool, some of the folks at DARPA helped kind of develop this mechanism back in the 90s, I believe. And so it was created to really optimize flexibility and allow things to happen much more quickly than they would have otherwise if you go through some of the other traditional mechanisms. One thing I'll point out, since we're on the sort of mechanistic discussion, is, because I have the NIH background behind me 17 times, I just want to point out, NIH often gives awards through grant mechanisms, and ARPA-H will be very judicious about the number of grants that it's actually going to give. It's going to have a more active sort of program management approach than a grant, which is, sort of you write it up and say what you're going to do, and then you do it. And there's, kind of an annual, sometimes a little bit more frequent check-in. This would be much more active project or program management with ARPA-H.
Great. Any other questions? Or actually, Tara, do you have a question you would like to pose to the audience?
Yeah, I mean, maybe a similar question to what I asked last week, and just, if thinking about some of the people on here who've interacted with industry, with the federal government, and what your interactions have been like. If there are, in particular, some barriers or roadblocks that slowed down timelines or limited flexibility, just things that that might be helpful for us to be aware of as we're developing this organization.
I'll pipe in with another question. Has there been any thought to streamlining the application process? What I mean by that is, typically a lot of these things, they get 100 applications, they're 100-page documents, and they down select to like 5. which is, horrific for everybody involved to get to that point. Is there any thoughts around how to streamline that and perhaps shorten the over investment that companies and research groups have to put into it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. That's something that we have thought a bit about. One of the things that we're considering in that space is kind of instituting an abstract, like a rolling abstract timeline for some of these awards when an announcement goes out. And have really quick turnaround on kind of the feedback on those. But that would be like a 2-page max kind of document, roughly. I mean, we haven't clearly defined this yet, so I don't want to set expectations too much, but very, very short document. And that would give you a sense if you're on the right track, right? And so before you spend, hours pulling together, a really long application, you at least would be able to do a little bit of a litmus test there.
Yeah, that would be great if there was a mechanism like that.
No, that's a great thing, and increasingly across at least with some of the SBR groups, they're like at NSF, they're trying to really push that model where everybody at least submit your 1-pager before you not waste your time. It's not a waste of time, but before everybody goes through the motions of reviewing a grant application, at least have a discussion of some kind and review of initial concept. So that's great that y'all are thinking about that.
Sometimes you get stuff in and people read the announcement and either it wasn't super clear or people misunderstand it and they submit something that it really is not at all in line with what the idea is. So it's good to know that before you spend all the time.
Great. Any other responses to Tara's question? For those that have done work with the government, what would you like to see or avoid, that sort of thing?
And of course, there are certain things that we have limited flexibility with addressing, but just having some awareness of some of the roadblocks or the rate limiting steps is helpful.
Well, I'll throw out one that while people are thinking about their bit, one of the things that came up from some of the investor groups that I talked to on the Life Science Angels side of things was that there was, and I don't know the answer to this, but they were like, well, okay, so assuming there's, SBIR, they understand, but what if it's a different contracting mechanism or something like that? Is the intent that ARPA-H would take like a seat on the cap table, the capitalization table in some way? Or these all gonna be non-dilutive one way or another? I mean, that was a question, right?
Yeah, no, that's a good, fair question for sure. No, I think this would be all non-dilutive funding because it's it's not exactly like a grant, but it's of that vein, right? It's to support some of the research and ARPA-H, in terms of some of the IP issues, we're still working out some of the details there. And of course, we're bound by some of the governmental laws and regulations, or we're bound by the governmental laws and regulations. But the idea is not that ARPA-H would own any of the patents or anything. We do not want to hold them. Likely just the rights to license if needed, and things like that.
That was a follow-up question, was like, what's the story on the IP side? So
I'm reading your mind today.
What's that?
I said, I feel like I'm reading your mind today.
All right, any other groups?
Now that one last question, I've got to jump off here in a sec. So the other one is that takes time and can often be complex is the IRB, or for clinical stuff. It can often slow programs down to a creep. I ran one out of Hawaii and it took a year to get the authorizations to do the clinicals on PTSD. Any thoughts on that and how the group will approach it?
Yeah, single IRBs are going to be important. I think, we're still working through some of the issues around, the clinical research element aspects and how to speed that up. One of the things that has come up in some of these discussions is like, how can we revolutionize how we do clinical research and how we run clinical trials? And maybe that's an ARPA-H program and question in and of itself. So, I think some more thought needs to be given to that.
Thank you.
Great, great. All right. Well, since everyone is being quiet and I've been asking a lot of questions, I'll give it a very awkward 3 seconds of silence so we can see if anybody else wants to pipe in with something, and then I'll turn it over to you, Tara, for maybe some closing remarks, and we'll go from there. All right, awkward silence. Second 1, second 2, second 3.
I feel like it makes it slightly less awkward that you're counting it. So.
I don't know. I tried it out for the first time. Maybe it'll work, maybe not. I don't know. It's fine. Anyway, so thank you everybody for attending. Tara, thank you very much for your time and for sharing. Definitely, if there are questions that come up after this, whether you didn't want to pipe in or not, that's fine. Please feel free to send this on to the Science Center team, and we'll be glad to ferry it over to Tara, make sure she gets a hint of it, and go from there. But beyond that, Tara, I'll sort of turn it over to you for any closing remarks.
I just was gonna say, thank you all for joining, and thanks for the invite. And we're always happy to talk about ARPA-H because we're really excited about this this organization as a whole, and the potential opportunity that it can bring to really think about how we can make some amazing advances to improve health. So thank you all, and I hope you have a great afternoon.